The lesson there was pretty clear, which is you bet on people. You find amazing people. I mean, the investment business actually is pretty easy. It's not complicated. Not easy is the wrong word. It's not complicated. You just find these exceptional people, and then you ride them. You ride that horse.
All right, we are back for another episode of Under the Number. Today, our guest is Michael Moe. He's been my boss for the past 3 years. He's the founder and CEO of GSV. Many people might not know this, but Michael was actually a college quarterback back in the day at the University of Minnesota, where he played for Lou Holtz. To kick it off right off the top, tell me about Coach Holtz.
Well, the experience with Coach Holtz was pretty life-changing for me, just in terms of being around him and the lessons I learned from having him as my coach. I say we had a love-hate relationship. I loved him. He hated me. But, when he came into the University of Minnesota, the University of Minnesota was the worst Division I football team in the United States of America, and I'm not exaggerating. We were that bad. And yet, just through the way that he changed people's mindset, demanded accountability, created a team, we went from the people that getting wiped off the field to being able to compete for a Big Ten championship, and the same cast of characters. So it was a very transformative experience for me. And probably other than my dad, nobody's had more influence on me than Coach Holtz. Maybe Bill Campbell's another person we might have an opportunity to speak about as well. But those two people are pretty remarkable. Both had football backgrounds.
No doubt. We'll definitely get to Bill Campbell. So talk a little bit about how formative for the rest of your life in the decades following college it was for you to have played quarterback.
Well, playing quarterback, and again, when I was doing it, it was just fun. And I couldn't imagine, it's just like it's a great, football's, in my view, the greatest sport on earth. And being had the opportunity to play quarterback where you get to be the kind of field general, it's just a fun experience. After those days are over, how do you apply that experience to the rest of your life? And, I think it taught a lot of lessons in hindsight, and I've certainly applied those for my business career. But one is that it's the little things that make the difference, and that as a quarterback, when things get tough, people look to you, and you have to show confidence, you have to be calm, you have to be able to inspire people, and it sounds like obvious, but that is sort of a make or break, in football for sure. But it's a make or break in life and business. I mean, there's all sorts of different challenges, curveballs, and it's how you adjust those challenges. How do you rise up? When things get tighter, how do you slow things down? And how do you make sure when all said and done, you just threw an interception or you just had a fumble or had a bad penalty? Well, you got to move forward. It's, you got to be able to erase that and be able to focus on what's most important now. And so there's so many lessons about both playing quarterback and playing football that I think are so valuable. That's one of the reasons I'm very passionate about the game and how making sure the game continues to thrive as a opportunity for people to really learn a lot of lessons beyond the game. Leadership and discipline and teamwork and all sorts of things that football is just an amazing. It's kind of I call it invisible learning.
Yeah,
You're learning a lot of lessons by doing something that is challenging but really fun to do.
So, and we've talked about this at length. You've hired a lot of young people over the course of your career. You really enjoy hiring people who were at one point in time athletes. You like partnering with them, working with them. Why is that, number one? Yeah. And two, who are some examples of people that you either have worked directly alongside or who have inspired you in the business world, who people may or may not know actually were athletes themselves? I've got one in mind, one that really shocked me when you told me this, but I'll let you take it away.
Well, I'm going to have to come up with the person you're referring to, but listen, my dad was a big time, college football player and baseball player. He was MVP of his football team at the University of Minnesota. He was on a world championship baseball team. And my dad told me growing up how important sports was for life and business. And I'm thinking like my dad, sports is fun. And there's business and there's life. And it's, don't be, give me this kind of, this ridiculous message. And, it's the old saying, the older I got, the more I realized how right my dad was. So very quietly, I could say it now probably, but at some point as I was running businesses and hiring people, I really looked to hire people that had played sports and, in particular team sports. Why? So many things. But, when you're on a team, you realize one, what matters is it's all about, the team winning and what level of contribution you play in this overall organization. Also, what you realize again, kind of back to this adversity piece. I mean, there's adversity happens every day in business, and how you respond to that, is everything. And so if you're in sports, you have a lot of adversity. You get knocked down, you got to get up. You have calls that go against you, maybe unfair. It doesn't matter. You just, nobody cares. What they care about is, okay, move forward, and how do you win? And when things get tight, how can who are the people that rise up and perform when it really matters, when there's a lot of pressure on you? People that have that experience in team sports, that's sort of ingrained in them. And so I got to a place where I said, basically, find me team sport players, because they're gonna be the ones that are gonna help this organization win.
So many baked in intangibles that really can't be taught or learned anywhere outside of being on the field or on the court with other teammates. The person I was thinking of was Howard Schultz.
Oh, well, go ahead.
You had told me a couple months ago that he actually was a football player and was a quarterback, and I never knew that.
Yeah, no, Howard Schultz, he's an excellent athlete. Played college football at Northern Michigan as a quarterback, and first person in his family to go to college. And Howard Schultz is just a remarkable entrepreneur. And again, I think a lot of his entrepreneur, there's nothing in his background from a business standpoint that you'd say, oh, this guy's going to be an incredible leader and somebody who is going to create this, what is it, 40,000 units at Starbucks today. Other than if you looked at his background, how he got, before he got involved in business, you say, okay, this guy's, he's a leader. He's a leader. He's creative. He's disciplined. He's tough. And so, yeah, no, I thought you were going to talk about people who had worked in our organization. And,
Oh, okay.
and I was thinking there's a bunch of them,
Yeah.
but I wasn't exactly sure which person you were necessarily referring to, because now over, we had ThinkEquity Partners that was started, 25 years ago, which is amazing. And then, GSV and some of the related businesses, GSV, and there's a lot of former athletes that have been part of what I've been doing.
So let's double click though on Howard Schultz and Starbucks, because that's not a random entrepreneur that you picked. You've had some FaceTime many years ago. Starbucks actually plays a bit of a significant role in your early career. Talk about that.
Well, everybody is shaped by the people that they meet and the books they read, and I mean, it's like what influences you. And just out of pure luck, I was a young research analyst, covering everything that moved between Minneapolis and Seattle. That was my job. Ridiculous job, but great learning experience. And so, just like one of the 4 meetings I had in that day was with Starbucks, who some of my friends had said, you got to meet this little company and this little coffee company in Seattle. They're growing fast and people love them.
What year was this?
It was like 1992.
Okay.
And literally, I thought the idea was absurd. Like a coffee company that people are going to invest in. Like this doesn't make any. This is goofy. And the true story, I remember it was like a Thursday afternoon in Seattle. It's rained like it always is, and it was the 4th meeting I had that day. And I wanted to get home on a plane, and I just said, you know what, I'm going to cancel. This is going to be a waste of time. But luckily, Starbucks was located right off the highway on the way to the airport. And I said, okay, I'll stop by. And my friends said, okay, like I'll learn something maybe. Right?
Yeah.
And I walk in the door, and you could just tell something magical is going on. From everything from the receptionist who treated you like a long lost friend to, you had this energy in the air. And, Starbucks at the time had some, they were based in Seattle, had some stores in Vancouver, just had come to San Francisco, but nobody really knew about them. It certainly wasn't a category that anybody said, oh, this is a great investment category. But then I met Howard Schultz, who at the time, he was 38 years old, I think. He had braces on his teeth, right? But he was able to articulate this compelling vision of not just how he was going to have Starbucks coffee that's all over the planet, but how he's going to change people's life, how he's going to change the world, basically one cup of coffee at a time. And it's, sounds crazy even as I say it today, but that's in fact what they did. And I believed. And so from a business career standpoint, and again, I was a research analyst investor, what the lesson there was pretty clear, which is you bet on people. You find amazing people. I mean, the investment business actually is pretty easy. Not complicated. Not easy is the wrong word. It's not complicated. You just find these exceptional people, truly not just pretty good, not just, exceptional. And then you ride them. You ride that horse. And, that was Howard Schultz. I mean, what he accomplished, over the next, 30 plus years has been extraordinary. And yeah, it was a pretty important lesson for me to learn early in my career.
And you went back after that meeting, and what did you do with that information?
Well, I was the first person to write research on Starbucks coffee. Right?
Yeah.
So
there you go.
and again, it was so many lessons just in being that experience. But the bottom line, so I wrote a book called Finding the Next Starbucks, which the publishers maybe name it that. I want to name it Find the Next Google, but they want to find the next Starbucks. But they said, no, we think Google's might be a fad. I'm going, okay, whatever.
They thought that title was too risky? Finding the Next Google?
Yeah, Finding the Next Google. And by the way, 2006, right? 2006, the publishers, again, Penguin, these guys, are sophisticated book publishers. They said, no, we really like, I mean, by the way, could you imagine calling it Find the Next Starbucks in 1993 or 94?
Yeah.
I mean, when I was at Lehman Brothers in New York, and I was, as a big bull on Starbucks, people thought I was crazy because they hadn't gotten to New York yet. And again, they just said, like, this young analyst is just an idiot. I remember getting in an argument with the reporter from the Wall Street Journal, Dave Kansas, who turned out, ended up being a friend of mine, becoming a friend of mine. But he was giving me all this grief and kind of trying to make me look silly because, there's this guy that's recommending this stupid coffee company in Seattle, and but it turned out okay.
Yeah, no kidding. So let's talk about another very powerful and successful executive who had a football background. Tell me about the first time you met Bill Campbell.
Well, Bill Campbell, the coach of Silicon Valley, who, I don't think there's been a more important, more influential person in Silicon Valley, because I don't think it would exist without Bill Campbell. I mean, everybody talks about Steve Jobs and they talk about Larry Page and they talk about, Andy Grove and all these amazing people, which are very true. But Bill Campbell was sort of the glue and the catalyst behind all this. So Bill, was obviously the board of Apple and Google and Jeff Bezos' advisor and Mark Andreessen's advisor. But when I first met him, I had no idea who he was. And so this was 2001. And my oldest daughter, Maggie, had just started going to this small private school down in Silicon Valley. And I get an email saying dads and daughters are going to the Giants game on Sunday morning. And so I thought, oh, this would be a good chance to meet some of their parents. And, my daughter's new to the school and so forth. So I show up at this Catholic school at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning, and this guy with a baseball cap and blue jeans. And we have this little bus that we're taking up to the game. Flips open a Bud Light, hands it to me, says, I'm Bill Campbell. Who are you? So anyway, Bill sits next to me on the bus going up to the game. And he goes, what do you do? And I kind of puff my chest out and say, I'm the CEO of this new investment bank in San Francisco, ThinkEquity Partners, blah, blah, blah. What do you do? He goes, oh, I'm retired. I said, oh, really? What did you do? Oh, I was in the software industry. Oh, who'd you work for? Intuit. What'd you do at Intuit? Oh, I was the CEO. So I'm like slumping in my seat as we're kind of like, I couldn't believe I didn't know who this guy was because I thought I knew, but he'd been very quiet under the radar, even though he had all these important relationships. And so we get to the game, and everybody from the guy taking tickets to the president of the Giants is slapping Bill on the back, and and I'm going like, okay, like clearly I'm an idiot, but Bill certainly is one of the most, I mean, like I said, Coach Holtz, my dad, Bill Campbell, the most extraordinary, most influential person. I've just been very, very fortunate to call him a friend.
And talk about how, so he, prior to getting to Silicon Valley, was a football coach.
The reason they call him coach of Silicon Valley is, he, out of college, he went to Columbia. He was the captain of the Columbia football team. And then he continued, he went coaching, and ended up being the head football coach at Columbia, which wasn't a very good gig. And his wife told him to get a real job, because he had, a young family. And so, ultimately moved out to Silicon Valley and was just selling computers for Apple. It's just a regular quota carrying salesman. But, in 9 months, he's run sales at Apple and he becomes Steve Jobs' closest advisor. And, the rest is kind of history. But yeah. And, what made Bill, Bill was, he called himself a dumb football coach, but what made Bill was very, very bright. He wasn't a technologist, even though he was the advisor to all these technology CEOs.
Right.
But what he understood better than anybody was people and how to motivate people, how to kick them in the pants when they needed to kick in the pants, or how to build them up when they needed to build up. And he just knew, and he cared about you, not because whether you were the person that was the landscaper at the school or you were a billionaire. Bill treated you the same. He really judged you or spent time with you based on what he thought of you as a person. And that was a pretty interesting lesson too. He never made the calculation, what's this guy do for me?
Right.
He made his judgment was, do I like you, and how do I help you?
Caring about relationships, selectively picking who he associated with, give his unbelievably valuable time to. There's an example with Google where they were going to pay him some sum to speak to the company, and he said no, but they gave him stock instead.
Everybody wanted more of Bill's time. Right. And so Google, he was a key advisor to Google. Google actually wrote a book, The $1 Trillion Coach. I mean, Eric Schmidt and two other key people there, Jonathan Rosenberg, wrote this book. But they felt Bill was so valuable that they wanted him to be there more than just the kind of half a day a week that he spent. And so they offered him kind of Major League Baseball or professional sports type of money to do that, and he turned it down because he just he didn't want to feel like he was doing something just because he was getting paid to do that. He only wanted to spend his time in places with people where he really felt like what he was where he wanted to be spending his time. Now Bill did very well financially, so he wasn't against being compensated, but he just wanted to make sure that wasn't going to influence how he spent his time or the people he spent time with.
So taking it back to the point about playing team sports, being a team player, a lot of the things that you learned through playing football, tying that into, there's a list of companies that you've been involved with over the years. And there was one stretch where it's Palantir, Facebook, Snap, Spotify, Dropbox, Lyft, investing in all of these companies before any of them were public. And I've talked to you and said, how do you even get an allocation in those hot companies at that time? And you've kind of told me about how at the end of the day, like you say, it's all a people business, and it has to do with the way that you treat people, the way that people think that they'll be a long-term partner with you, the way that you'll play nice in the sandbox, as I heard you say before. Talk a little bit about that. I kind of feel like that is really a common thread that comes back to understanding team dynamics.
Yeah, no. So I love growth companies, and I viewed, my job, it still would be my job, is how to identify and invest in the best growth companies in the world. And so, yes, we had a innovative fund that invested in private companies with a publicly traded stock. And so we invested in Facebook and Twitter and Palantir and, a bunch of game-changing businesses. And how did we identify those companies and how do we get access? Frankly, when you've seen a great growth business, you see a great management team, you know something special is going on at these businesses, right? And it might take some bumps in the road, but you meet Daniel Ek at Spotify, he's amazing. You meet Alex Karp at Palantir, again, these companies, today, Palantir took a while before all of a sudden became the monster that it is, but they were had such exceptional people. But how do we get involved? How do you get involved? You got to be able to identify it. But the access is really about people trust you and like you and want you to be involved, because the best companies, everybody and their brother wants to be involved. So how do they pick you? And it gets down to like what you learn in kindergarten, that you get that opportunity if people like you, trust you, and believe that you're going to be a good partner. And so trust, your reputation I think in everything is everything, but I think clearly in the investment business, your reputation and the trust that people have in you, if you don't have that, good luck.
Okay. And so the last decade plus of building GSV, the GSV Summit, GSV Ventures, all the activity that the firm has been involved in, a lot of it has, obviously for people who are in the know, has revolved around education and ed tech and the knowledge economy. The collegiate landscape, certainly from an athletics standpoint, has been more or less turned on its head in the last 4 years with NIL, transfer portal, college athletes effectively becoming professionals. And there's so much change that comes downstream of that for the entire university as we know it. And you can see it in, we've written about in the past, looking at just the influence that the Nick Saban football era had on the University of Alabama, how it changed the entire demographic set of the students who attended the school, and obviously, as a result of that, made the school a lot of money, bringing a lot more out-of-state students and out-of-state tuition. That's just one example. There are so many second-order effects of these changes that everyone sees on the news on ESPN every day. What do you make of what you've seen in the last 4 or 5 years, and where do you think this is going?
First of all, I mean, Dorothy, we're not in Kansas anymore. I mean, things have changed, and the genie's not going back in the bottle. I do think. I mean, you talk about the second order effects. I mean, the economics piece is obvious, and I think that is very going to be. It is clearly very disruptive to universities, and it's going to, I think, get even more disruptive. So these alignments between private equity firms and collaboratives and all these different things that are taking place is going to continue. What concerns me, I mean, there's a number of things that concern me, but what I don't think people appreciate is I believe that the way things are with the transfer portal and NIL and everything else, what it's really doing is destroying the concept of the student athlete. I look back, again, it was a long time ago. I was at the University of Minnesota, but the guys, my teammates, many had been first generation at school. Coach Holtz made people go to class. We had great internships. I look today, 40 years later, and many of my teammates, through the experience they got at the University of Minnesota, are very, very successful, and have been, changed the whole trajectory for their families. I think when you transfer to school once a year, you're going to get an online classes. You show up at the football facility. You have a tutor to make sure you stay eligible. You're not getting the education that you could be getting. You're not making the connections with other students and the community as you could. And so it's great to get a little bit of, get a little bit of cash and put it in the bank, but that's gone quick. And so then what do you have after that? There's so many things that are going on that I think are really, need to be addressed thoughtfully. But what I get the most worried about is just this experience for the student athletes and what that really means. And we all know, less than 1% of the people who play college football, for example, are going to be able to play in the NFL. And so it's just like, okay, this incredible opportunity that has been present for so long needs to not be destroyed.
You have a pretty interesting line of sight into the collegiate landscape, obviously through the GSV world of investing and the GSV Summit, an event that you co-founded. Every university president attends it. I mean, there's leaders from administrations from all the biggest colleges there every year, and you have conversations with these people. Also, your position on the board of the National Football Foundation, which is the nonprofit entity that actually runs the College Football Hall of Fame. You get to talk to these people. Do you get the sense that there was so much significant change so abruptly that a lot of these people were actually caught off guard?
Well, for sure, people are caught off guard, and I think there's still a number of people that are kind of just putting their head under the sand and praying and hoping that things go back to the good old days. I think the phase that we're in right now is you have some of these new initiatives, and you're going to see some people that adopt those because they know they need to do something. But most, I think, are a little bit paralyzed.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, being on the National Football Foundation is a real honor because it's a great organization that's focused on the institution of college football and all the reasons why it matters, from leadership and kind of winning in life. But it's a big challenge for all of us. I mean, the foundation has some amazing people on it, including the SEC commissioner, the Big Ten commissioner, a number of college presidents, a bunch of athletic directors, a bunch of former All-American football players. And so you ask, why am I on it? It's a case of mistaken identity, but I don't tell anybody. I don't dissuade anybody. So but it's important. It's important to me. I think it's important to a lot of people that we get more out in front of this than, I think it's happened. It has happened very quick, and people are trying to grapple. What does it mean?
So a lot of what we talk about on Under the Number, both in the writing and on the podcast, so at the end of the day, I like talking to people who are decision makers and A-tier players in the sports economy. And I like to hear where they think things are going, what category of the sports economy value chain they are currently most focused on, where they are hoping to be most focused on, where they're paying the most attention to. Here's kind of a hypothetical question for you. If you have GSV Ventures, an education-focused fund. If you were a sports investor right now, what is a category or maybe an area that you would keep your eye on, or where you would want to be most involved? And this can range from, I mean, I put it in one of the essays, but there are real estate companies where their whole thing is, I want to get team ownership and I want to build mixed use real estate around it. There are early stage sports tech investors. There are obviously the private equity guys. There's a whole spectrum. If you were to do that today, where do you think you would position yourself?
Well, I hate to say all the above, but it really is, because I mean, sports as a category has really come into its own as something that is not just the playground for rich people looking to do things that make them feel important.
Right.
I mean, it's a incredible global business. I mean, you look at historically, kind of sports was a ticket and local sponsorship, and now all the different media opportunities, all the different kind of derivative from it. I mean, so I think, sports, leagues, all those are attractive. You look at, the media aspect of it. Media is all about engagement. There's nothing that engages people more than sports. If you look at the top 100 watched programs and TV last year, 94 of them were sports. Most of those were football. And that's going to continue. The betting that goes on, whether that's a good thing for society or not, it creates that much more engagement. Obviously, fantasy football is a $10 billion, category in the United States alone. But again, that just increases the engagement. And then, I just got back from Silicon Valley, and all anybody talks about in Silicon Valley today is how, AI is disrupting everything. But guess what? In sports, it's only going to enhance it. I mean, AI is not going to take away, the live entertainment game. It's only going to make it that much more interesting and more engaging. So I think again, the categories are all interesting. College sports, once again, I think there's a balance, between like what you could do opportunistically or what you could do for the long term,
Right.
and create value. I mean, obstacles create opportunities, problems create opportunities. There's lots of different problems. I think having smart, partnerships and solutions to this. I mean, not just opportunistic or the Band-Aid approach, which I think you're starting to see some of.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, we could talk for another hour about categories, but this is an area that is very, very fertile.
Rather than categories on the value chain, you'll have a unique perspective on this. You've spent a ton of time in the Middle East, in the UAE and Saudi, and you've told me that these people are obsessed with sports media and entertainment. They have more money than they know what to do with in a lot of cases. What are some of the conversations that you've had with people on the ground out there where you've come back and thought, wow, I didn't realize the level of fandom and enthusiasm around these types of things that exist half a world over?
I have spent a lot of time in the Middle East, and the UAE and Abu Dhabi, I call it the capital of capital, because it is, but it's increasingly become a hub for the future, and that's where a lot of the world's congregating. So a number of these kind of capital sources, these wealthy families or part of the royal families and so forth, sports is attractive on several levels. One, the economics of sports, it's recession resilient. It's it grows with inflation. It gets the bump. I mean, it's all sorts of things that make it just a good business for smart people to invest in. For the last 6 decades, it's compounded about 13% per year. So that is attractive. But then there's the notoriety, and a lot of these parts, these entities that have lots of capital, they also though want to get some recognition, some visibility, and frankly some connection. Sports is just a great way. You own a sports team or you're involved in a sports category, you get to meet a lot of interesting people, and so that accelerates many of these organizations' kind of global aspirations. And so it's in a business that does well. It's also has kind of a multiplier effect. And so all that makes it, at the top of the list, really. Everybody wants to invest in AI, but sports is pretty compelling for a lot of these sophisticated, funds.
So, and you wrote a white paper in the mid 90s called The Dawn of the Age of Knowledge that in a lot of ways was effectively a crystal ball into the future of education in America and globally, and how the internet would play a huge role in that, and a lot of the decentralization that you've seen, personalization that you've seen. One of the things that you discuss all the time, and we've spent a lot of time talking about over the last couple of years, is obviously the continued personalization of education. And it's not going to be a one size fits all model. It's very interesting how much that, of course, it seems obvious that it applies to athletics as well, and how little it's actually been applied. And from a training and athlete development and athlete optimization and injury prevention standpoint, I remember, this past summer I introduced you to Marcus Elliott, who was on the show a couple months ago with P3, one of the most innovative places in the world when it comes to athlete development. Talk a little bit about maybe what you saw there in that specific example, but also just the parallel of personalization education, personalization in training and athletic development.
Well, it's interesting. You look at the success of Indiana, and you probably saw the article in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. But one of the things that Coach Signetti at Indiana particularly focuses on is your kind of lower body flexibility, hip movement,
Right.
Foot movement, a lot of things that historically people looking, it's kind of like the Moneyball guy looks good, right? It looks good to the eye.
Yeah.
But not using any type of rigorous metric or anything that actually really matters. That is going to show how productive that person can be, how injury resistant they're going to be, and so forth. So yeah, P3 and the success they've got with the elite athletes, and around the world it just makes sense. It's only become that much more standard, and we're going to look back, at some point in the future and say like, what, why in the world wasn't this something that we were focused on or prioritized or understood
Yeah.
a long time ago. So yeah, that seems pretty clear. AI only accelerates that. And AI, I think it can be a force for good. It can be a force for problems. But I think done right in athletics and kind of training and how to optimize performance and optimize outcomes. It's and to help you, because everybody's different. Kind of how to have you be the best you can be. AI is going to make a huge difference. And again, I think the same is true for education. And and there's a lot of even like you think about coaching. There's a continuum. What's a coach? What's a tutor? What's a teacher? They're all part of the same family, right? And so a teacher or a coach that has better information, has real-time information, and knows how to apply that, is just going to be that more effective. And the student or the athlete, that person that is now having that be fed to them the exact best way that they learn, or all this stuff is going to accelerate performance, accelerate opportunity. So it's exciting.
So kind of in closing here, we've got an event this coming week here in Dallas, a Future of Sports and Media event where we're going to host Chip Paucek, who's the co-CEO and co-founder of Pro Athlete Community, PAC, and also Randall Lane, who's the chief content officer and editor of Forbes. GSV Ventures led the Series A in PAC, which at first glance, if you go on the website, you might think this is a sports investment. Why is GSV Ventures with the ed tech and education specialty doing here? Talk a little bit about PAC and what about this company made you want to lead that round and got you so excited?
A number of things. And, again, part of it was understanding, sports and some of everybody's familiar with the success of sports, but not necessarily as familiar with, what happens with these athletes after their career's done and so forth. And so if it was introduced to it by Chip, I was on his board when he was the CEO of 2U, which is a publicly traded company, online education company. And I initially heard, I said, well, that's a good idea. But then as I understood kind of what they were doing and the incredible engagement they were getting from their members, I said, okay, they're really onto something. So basically, PAC, in some element, is like a YPO for current and former professional athletes. It came out of the Miami Dolphin organization, but has evolved in a couple of years to have over 1,500 athletes. About half of them are football, but soccer, women's basketball, and you're a pro athlete, current or former, you can be a member of PAC. But it's all about how you take these elite skills and experience that you had in your very likely short pro career. By age 30, many of these people that's done, but now how do you apply that to success in life? And so PAC is helping them give the tools and the confidence and the connections to thrive, education and entrepreneurial skills and communication skills and how do you network. Also so it's an education business that way, as many businesses are, but it's all about having this community flourish. And the other piece of it is we all know how much influence athletes have. So athletes using that influence in positive ways for both the people they're reaching, but also themselves, there's just tremendous opportunity. So we're excited about it. Excited to have Chip to meet with a number of families and Randall Lane is an incredibly creative guy, and again, we're all friends. But he's also the founder of this National Thoroughbred League, which is a cool idea about effectively kind of like a Formula One, if you will, for for horse racing. So we're gonna have fun here in Dallas in a couple of days, but it's all good.
Looking forward to it. Last question. I hope that there are current student athletes and people playing college athletics who are tuning into this and watching. What is the advice that you would give specifically to a current college athlete who's trying to, whether it's into venture capital, whether it's into technology or finding an amazing growth company, what are the proactive things that somebody in that college age can do to build relationships, network, get in front of people like you? I mean, not giving out your email here, but what are the proactive things?
MM@gsv.com.
What are the proactive?
Pay it forward. As a Bill Campbell, pay it forward.
There you go. What are some of the proactive things, though, really that are practical? Because I know that there are a lot of people in college right now who are worried about their ability to get a job.
Yeah. So, again, Coach Holtz was remarkable because you just think all he cares about would be wins and losses. By the way, I think this all adds up to being successful. But he made everybody go to class. You had to have your teacher sign a sheet every week saying not only you went to class, but you participated. We had great internships where people were, we all had real jobs and getting exposed to things that were going on. So, and again, I think if you're a college athlete, hopefully your school's doing that, helping you with that. If you're a football player, the National Football Foundation is helping create things for like micro internships and being connected to different opportunities. But but being proactive, taking advantage of this opportunity, because it might not be fair to the rest of the world, but the reality is people want to, they want to be connected to athletes. And so reach out to people that can be interesting, for you to know. Ask them questions, ask them for help. People want to help. When they see that you're sincere and that you have passion and dreams. And the recognition is everybody was, young ones. And most of them have got helped along the way. So I look at me, again, I was fortunate to have a dad who, I thought, was a, great role model for me. I was fortunate to have a coach like Coach Holtz. I was fortunate to have a guy like Bill Campbell. But I was also fortunate just to get exposed to, again, getting to meet people and having them, just share with me how they were successful, in their life. What did they do? What books did they read? People that will take you under their wing. And being a college sports, being an athlete, it might not be fair, but they just got a more likely chance that they're going to do it. So take advantage of that now.
All right, we'll close it there. Thanks, Michael.
Awesome. Thanks, Brent. This is great.